Hi, welcome to question answering again. This one, I'm just going to take one question because it's kind of in a category all on its own. We talked about it a little bit before. The question was why was the Catholic Church illegal in Mexico? It was highly restricted, so illegal is kind of funny. So it's kind of funny that a lot of people think of, when they think of Mexico, they think of it as being a Catholic country, but it's actually only been just a couple of decades that the church was really able to operate without legal restrictions in that country. So around the time of the American Civil War, roughly, some things were going on in Mexican history that started to restrict the church. France came in, obviously it was a Spanish colony at one time. Anyway, people that were trying to change things and go toward independence sometimes saw the church as being more aligned with the royal powers, with the king of whatever country was, whatever empire or country was in power and holding it. So that's part of it, and that's been a problem in other parts. If you think about in France, in the French Revolution, it was the same kind of thing. The church tended to be aligned with the royals, with the king, and when the French Revolution came along, they were executing priests and bishops and stuff as quickly as they could. So in Mexico, it took a little bit of time to get to that point, but just roughly around the time of the American Civil War, it kind of started. You can look at Mexican history, see some of the things that were going on there. By roughly around World War I, it got really bad. There was a new Mexican Constitution in 1917 that really restricted the church's rights. And that meant that things like, for instance, a priest could not wear their priestly garments on the street. If they were going to dress like a priest, wearing the Roman collar or anything like that, they could only do that in the church. But if they went out on the street, they could be arrested. A priest could not talk about anything political. It's a little different than here, where there's, we don't have the priest telling us what to vote for in the United States. But in Mexico, they couldn't even say anything. Here they can say something. They do have some freedom of speech, but freedom of speech was completely taken away from the clergy. It got pretty bad, and even before the Civil War, the Catholic churches were often turned away from being churches, and animals were kept in them that just pooped on the floor and everything else. It was really a whole campaign of trying to eliminate the church. It's if you look for through a search for a wiki page on Christian persecution in Mexico, you can read more about it. By 1940, most of the worst of it was over. You can also look at the life of Father Miguel Pro and some of the other martyrs. It's an interesting thing. Just since I'm doing this one all by itself, I'll give you a little bit more information that's sort of interesting. There's thousands of priests. There were thousands of priests at the beginning of the persecutions all over Mexico. By the time that it was starting to ease up, it was down to a few hundred. Many of the Mexican states didn't have a single priest in the whole state. They were completely wiped out. A lot left the country. A lot were killed. The Father Miguel Pro in particular was executed by firing squad, if I remember correctly, and was that was a big deal where they put pictures up of it. The government thought that would scare everybody into quitting, but it didn't. And there were people that actually took up arms to rebel against the persecutions. There was a lot of death. I think probably 100,000 people died in all of it, on both sides, because the government was trying to repress it, and some people took up arms to defend themselves or defend the faith, and it was a regrettable period in Mexican history. The interesting thing is that of the priests, and I know there's been at least 25 priests, I believe, at least 25 priests canonized during that time. One of the requirements for them to be canonized, which occurred much later, was that they could not have taken up arms. If a priest became part of the rebel forces and started actively fighting, then they could not be canonized because they had taken up arms. For the lay people, I know some of the martyrs that were lay people were as young as 14. for them, that requirement was not there, but it had to be seen as a defensive thing. Had to be saving their people, not, blowing up trains. I'd heard that there was one train blown up. I don't know for sure, but it was a rough period. By 1940, I think most of the persecution in terms of what was in the Constitution, everything had been taken away. But it actually wasn't until, I believe, 1990 or 91 that they got rid of the last of the measures against the church. So even in recent times, there were still some laws against the church. Not saying it couldn't exist, but limiting activities and things. It's very interesting. It's good to look up that history. Look up that wiki page. It's a pretty good one. It's listed as being biased. I'm not sure which way it's biased. I didn't see anything interesting in there about that, but it's good history. And if you have any relatives that are old that used to live in Mexico or still do, you might want to ask them about it. And just see if they have any memories. Maybe if they're grandparents, they might not have lived through it, but they might remember something. Let's see, if they were born in 1940 when most of the measures were revoked, that puts them at 55 years old. 75 years old now. So that gives you some idea. If they're about 75 years old, they were born at the time when it was going away, but they might have heard stories about it when they were children. So interesting stuff. And if you have any more questions, although probably the best thing is look it up and learn everything you can about it. It's something that's not very well known, at least outside of Mexico. And I thought it was interesting. It was something that I only learned about, later in life. Not like last year, but later in life I learned about it. So kind of interesting. It's a lot of surprises when you study history. It's always a good thing to do. Anyway, thank you.